There are moments in history when ordinary people are thrust into extraordinary circumstances, moments when courage is measured not by medals, but by the swift, decisive choices made under pressure. Such a moment unfolded on an ordinary morning at 30,000 feet, aboard a commercial airliner bound for the skies with hundreds of innocent souls unaware of the peril that was about to descend. The protagonist of this tale was a man whose presence often went unnoticed, a quiet, methodical captain of American descent. His name was never broadcast in headlines, yet his skill, discipline, and moral compass were impeccable. He was not a figure of flamboyance, but a man of observation, of calculation. He knew that arrogance and recklessness often hide behind titles, behind the illusion of control. On that fateful day, the antagonist emerged not from the skies, but from within the cabin itself. A hijacker, confident and ruthless, stormed the aisles with a cold determination. He barked orders, waving his weapon with a terrifying precision, his arrogance palpable, his power assumed to be absolute. Every passenger froze. Fear rippled through the cabin like a tangible force, each heartbeat echoing the knowledge that this was not a mere disruption. It was a test of life and death. The hijacker believed that control was his alone. He believed that terror would bend the crew and passengers to his will. Yet he underestimated the quiet virtue of vigilance, the power of skill over bluster. Our captain, stationed calmly in the cockpit, recognized the signals, calculated the probabilities, and read the intentions that hid behind the hijacker's aggressive facade. Outside, the roar of engines provided a steady, unrelenting hum, a reminder that the plane was a world suspended in air, every system delicate, every decision amplified. Inside, tension grew thicker than oxygen, a silent scream held back by protocol and instinct. It was not a fight of brute strength or reckless heroics. It was a collision of mind against arrogance, of training against hubris, of virtue against audacity. In the seconds that followed, the cabin would witness a lesson in history, that power unearned is fragile, and that courage, when coupled with skill, can be swift, unseen, and devastating. The hijacker lunged, weapon raised, eyes blazing with the certainty of domination. Every passenger recoiled, some clutched hands in prayer, others braced themselves against the seat in front. Time seemed to decelerate, every second a knife edge of anticipation. In the cockpit, the captain's hands were steady, calm, deliberate, precise. He activated the comms discreetly, signaling the authorities, yet the moment demanded immediacy. With a single fluid motion, he released the safety, engaged the override, and moved in silence. The hijacker's arrogance had blinded him. He assumed that panic equaled power. But the first crack, sharp, undeniable, split the cabin air. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the mind of every onlooker. In less than a heartbeat, the hijacker was unbalanced, disarmed, and restrained. Silence fell. A frozen calm replaced the earlier chaos. The plane's interior smelled faintly of tension, sweat, and the metallic bite of adrenaline. Passengers stared wide-eyed. Some could not speak, others could not comprehend the speed of events. What had seemed a moment of inevitable tragedy had evaporated in a blink. The captain's face was a mask of concentration, but in his eyes gleamed a quiet triumph, the acknowledgement of duty fulfilled, of lives preserved, of arrogance humbled. There were no dramatic flourishes, no loud declarations of victory. The act was over before it had fully begun, a testament to the undeniable truth. Preparation, skill, and virtue can defeat the loudest displays of power in an instant. The cabin remained silent for a long, almost unbearable moment. Eyes shifted toward the captain, toward the restrained figure of the hijacker. Murmurs began to ripple through the passengers, a mixture of awe, relief, and disbelief. The realization that catastrophe had been averted hit slowly, like waves lapping at a storm-tossed shore. Flight attendants moved with tentative steps, checking passengers, ensuring that everyone had survived not only the physical threat, but the psychological shock. Some passengers embraced, tears of relief mingling with unspoken gratitude. Others simply stared, frozen in the knowledge that history had brushed past them, a brush so close they could feel its cold, precise edge. The hijacker, now secured, glared with a mixture of fury and humiliation. His arrogance, once so commanding, was shattered. He had believed that control was his, that fear was a weapon he could wield at will. And yet, in the span of a heartbeat, he had been proven wrong. The captain had acted not out of heroics, but out of duty, skill, and moral clarity. A senior flight officer arrived to assess the situation, questions sharp and exact. How did this happen so quickly?" he asked, incredulous. The captain's response was measured, devoid of pride, yet full of quiet authority. "Arrogance is loud. Skill is silent. I simply did what was necessary." The moral was clear. Titles, threats, and displays of force are temporary illusions. True control, true power, resides in preparation, knowledge, and the steady application of virtue. The passengers, once paralyzed by fear, now carried with them a lesson etched in memory: that fear can be met with calm, that chaos can be countered with discipline, and that arrogance, when faced with competence and courage, collapses swiftly. News of the incident traveled fast, though the world would not know all the details. The captain, true to his nature, requested minimal attention. He understood that the value of an act is not measured in fame, but in its effect. The lives saved, the lesson imparted, the truth revealed. Virtue, when combined with skill, triumphs over intimidation. Among passengers, a quiet reverence took root. The child who had clutched a parent's hand now whispered a prayer of thanks. The elderly man, once trembling, now nodded with a knowing respect. In that cabin, the line between hero and ordinary man blurred. The distinction mattered little, for history had recorded a moral that would last far longer than the fleeting fear of a single morning. The hijacker's arrogance had been neutralized. His attempts to dominate had collapsed under the weight of prepared skill. And the captain, he remained calm, collected, and almost invisible, a reminder that true power is rarely flamboyant, often unseen, and always disciplined. In the weeks and months that followed, the story of the incident transformed from news report to legend. Among aviation circles, it was recounted with reverence. Pilots spoke of it as a lesson in vigilance, of courage under pressure, of moral clarity overriding the spectacle of arrogance. Passengers shared their experience, each retelling adding a layer of awe, a tint of near mystical respect for the quiet heroism that had unfolded above the clouds. The captain's name was known to few, yet his actions inspired many. Aircrew across the country began to revisit training protocols, emphasizing calm decision-making, observation, and the application of moral reasoning in moments of crisis. Scholars wrote about the incident in journals of leadership and ethics, highlighting the incontrovertible lesson. Power without virtue is ephemeral. Skill without conscience is hollow. But when the two converge, results can be instantaneous, decisive, and unforgettable. The hijacker's arrogance became a cautionary tale, referenced by instructors in training rooms where the hum of engines reminded them that lives often hung by the thread of competence. "Never underestimate the silent observer," became a mantra whispered in flight simulators and in the quiet halls of aviation academies. Years later, the passengers would recount the story to children and grandchildren. "There was a man on that plane," they would say, "who faced terror not with anger, but with clarity. He acted swiftly, silently, and saved us all." And in the echo of those words, the legend grew, not merely of a plane hijack averted, but of a principle etched into human understanding. Arrogance can be humiliated, abuse of power can be undone, but virtue, skill, and moral courage are timeless. In the end, the captain's final words to a young flight officer captured the essence of the moment. Fear speaks loudly, courage whispers, and the world often only notices the whisper when it has already changed everything. History rarely pauses to honor the quiet, but some moments, some people, leave a resonance that refuses to fade. And above the clouds, on a plane that could have been the scene of tragedy, history found its lesson, etched in the silent, decisive act of one man who understood that preparation, virtue, and courage were stronger than any threat. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories from Histofy.